Hello and welcome to Rosie's Preserving School Pressure Canning, and it's all fruity today. We're not actually pressure canning because really I don't think that we really need to with fruit. It tends to partly destroy it, and we can preserve most fruits perfectly adequately just with water bathing. So that's what we're going to do. A lot of people get in a muddle over water bathing. When I was growing up, you used to call it bottling, and my mother used to do it in the oven in a meat tray with water in it and everything. Well, I think that that's, it's not exactly the safest thing to do, because when it's hot and all the water's slopping about and the bottles are hot, it's difficult to manage. So I prefer to do it in a big pan with water in the pan. And you don't need anything special. You just want the biggest pan you can find. It doesn't need to do anything other than heat water. So you need a pan, you need something in the bottom. Now I'm going to use my pressure canner without the lid on, and we've got the rack in the bottom, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you're using a straightforward stock pot or jam pan, you need to fold either a J cloth, a tea towel, or even newspaper, and put in the bottom so that the jars don't clatter about and potentially break when it's processing. That's the reason you do that. But then you put loads of water in the pan. The water needs to come up and over the top of the jar. And again, people get in a terrible fuss about that, thinking the water will go into the contents of the jar. But because of the inside and outside pressures and everything, it can't. The air is being forced out of the jar, and that keeps the water out. So it needs to go over the top, or in the case of if you're doing sauces in tall bottles, just get the water as high as you can and make sure that it's processed thoroughly. And I'll explain that as we go on. I've got a few examples here of what I've been doing throughout the year. I can't do every fruit today, obviously, because things aren't in season, and I don't really like buying things that aren't, although I've got some bought plums. So I've got straightforward pears in the jar there. They're pears out of the garden. Apples, they were also out of the garden. The ones I've got to do today aren't, but all my apples are done, so they're all in jars like this. And then I've got figs in brandy. Figs are a good one. There's often a lot of figs around this time of year in the shops, even if you haven't got them in the garden at all. And they preserve perfectly well in these sorts of jars. I mean, you can put them in the canning jars, and you can use straightforward regular jam jars for this. You don't need anything super strong because you're not putting it under pressure. I'm going to use my canning jars because they're just, there. But then I've got some apricots in a syrup. They were done earlier in the year. They weren't out of the garden, but they were in season. I've got blackberry and apple, which is there, if you can see. And what else have I got? These are boozy plums. They're sort of done in a lovely jar to gift, and I'll go through that. And the last one is pineapple, and this is my new favorite. I've only done it this year, preserved pineapple, and it's fab, and it's great for a quick pudding with some yogurt or something if you want a pudding and you haven't got anything that you need to or want to cook. So that's all that. They've all been water bathed. Oh, and I bought some vintage clementines with sugar and amaretto in there, and they are from 2020. They were done, and they're still perfectly all right, and they were water bathed, so just haven't got used for some reason. And I've got some plums, some pears, and some apples to do today, and some other sort of procedures to go through. So it's all down to prep as usual. I'm going to leave the apples till last because of the way I'm going to do them. I'll probably start with the plums because they don't need to go into water. These are these huge plums that you get from Spain or wherever this time of year. And you can either halve them or quarter them. Quarters will go into the jars more easily, you know, more efficiently. So, and as they're so big, that's what I'll do, I think. I've got my jars all here and I'll pack them as I go. You can just dry pack them. I never cook fruit before it's water bathed. I used to, and then I used to just get jars of sort of fruit pulp, really. So now I water bath it from raw, and it's very much more of a satisfactory result. So pack them in. Leave a bit of headspace if you don't fill them right to the top. And then I won't do all these plums, I'll just do some jars. I've got some water in my canner, but I probably will need to top it up, but I didn't want to put too much in, and then it wouldn't overflow. But I want to put the jars in and see how much they displace, and then I'll fill it up before we start. So it's pretty quick. If you like a particular sort of mix, you can do that. Mixed fruit, like the blackberry and apple. I'll talk about that in a minute. You don't have to just keep it to one variety of fruit. And I do cherries, all sorts of things in season. Black currants are nice done this way because they stay nice and whole. Don't get destroyed by freezing. Raspberries. And you could do strawberries, you could bottle them, but I would do them as I'm going to show you the apples. I wouldn't put them in syrup. I haven't done any yet. I keep meaning to try it, but I've seen it done often enough. It's all the same principle. So pack those in. You can also use spices, any spices that you like. If you like cinnamon, you can put that in with your apples, or even pears, plums. Plums, I like allspice personally. Goes very well with it. Allspice berries, not mixed spice. You can do flavor wise whatever you like. You can put vanilla pods in. They go nicely with plums and figs as well. So let's do a few more. I've got some smaller ones in the bottom there, which I got for our class on Wednesday, and they weren't ripe enough to even cut open. So I might do a couple of jars of those, because either that or they'll go over it before I have a chance to fix them. And then you can use booze, of course. You can put anything in that you like. If you want to leave it plain, that's absolutely fine. But at this time of year, if you use the clip top jars, they make a nice gift. If you do a sort of complete jar and do some plums with some brandy, or I'm going to use amaretto today with the plums, which goes particularly well. Nice almond flavour, and it's also nice with the apricots. So that's an optional extra. You don't have to worry about it not setting or anything like that with jam. It's this is all very sort of free and easy. You can do gooseberries in the season with maybe some elderflowers in with it, just for flavour, or some elderflower cordial would go nicely. So let's do these little red ones. Oh, still not awfully ripe. Now I'm just doing these for us, you know, for our sort of household shelves. I'm not doing them to sell or gift. So I'm going to stick to the things that we like. But if you want to make up hampers and things, it's nice to put a jar of something a bit special in, I think. And also put some instructions on there, because people won't necessarily know what to do with them these days, because not everybody does this sort of thing like they used to. The other thing that goes really well with amaretto and water bathing is prunes. If you get the ready to eat ones that are all soft and no stone, and then just put them in the jar as is, and you can put some syrup over them and then some amaretto. They're absolutely delicious, and they're lovely on things like your weekend porridge, unless you have to drive somewhere, or on rice pudding, anything like that. It gives it a real lift, so makes it all a bit special. And my regular preserving students will know I've got a fantastic recipe for a chocolate cake, which the amaretto prunes anoint. The chocolate cake is very dense and very solid, but before you serve it, you pour the prunes over the top and it soaks in all the juice, and it tastes amazing. But they're still nice on their own, actually. And they will keep. If you do a big jar of them, you can just open them and take out as many as you need and put the lid back on, and they just stay fine in the cupboard. So there's no problem about eating all of them in one go or anything like that, unless you want to. All right, I think that's all that will go in there, and they're all a bit hard anyway. Stones. All right, I'm just going to go and rinse my hands a second. That'll be 2 seconds. So I don't think I'm going to add any. Oh, I might put some more spice berries in, a few into here, a little spoon. I'm not going to put many, just a sort of a scant teaspoonful. Be careful when I empty them out that I don't tip them out into the crumble dish and end up with allspice berries in it. Another good thing with plums is sherry. Putting sherry in with the plums, and it gives them a lovely well-rounded flavour, especially if you've got a nice dark sort of cream sherry. Now what I have here is vanilla sugar. I keep a jar with caster sugar in it and the vanilla pods. You can probably just about see them in there. And then it needs filling up. We're filling up with caster sugar, and then the pods go on for ages and ages, and you can just keep on adding the sugar in, and that makes a nice flavour without having to remember to put vanilla in. It's nice in coffee and things like that as well. So just put about a tablespoonful of sugar in. If you don't want any sugar at all, you don't need to put any. But I like a bit of sugar, so I don't worry about making syrups and all that kind of thing. I just put the sugar in the jar. And then top up with water. In the case of plums. The water doesn't have to come right up and over the top of them. And then I'm going to wipe the rims just like we do for pressure canning, because if you prefer to make a syrup in a pan and ladle it in, you're going to need to make sure you haven't got any on the rim of the jar. And just to make sure I haven't caught them with the fruit as I put it in. There we are. I'm putting these lids on. If you're using the other kind of, jam jar, just put on the lug lid and don't tighten it up tight. Just put it on and twist so that the air can escape. And if you're using clip top jars, just clip them down normally and the air pushes out between the glass top of the lid and the seal. You don't need to worry about it doing that. So these I'm going to do up just so they're done up. I'm not doing them tightly. And I'm putting them in the canner, which I've already got some water in. The water in the canner is cold at the moment. My red one. I'm going to put the canner on. Now it's got something in it to heat up. Right. So I've got some, I'm going to go on to my pears now. I've got some salt here. I'm just going to put a bit in this water. You can use the juice of a lemon or lemon shells if you've got them from squeezing them for some juice at some point. Just to acidify the water and stop the fruit discoloring. So I'm going to just cut these into quarters. And most of the fruit I do goes into crumbles, I have to say. So that's what when I prep it for a crumble. So I don't cut it overly small because then it sort of keeps a bit more bite. If you sort of cut it too tiny, it gets too soft in the processing. And that's why I'm only using 500ml jars, because that's plenty for our little one serving crumble dish. And then but you can put it in bigger jars, obviously, if you've got a bigger family to cater for. Peel them as economically as you can. And when you're choosing fruit for bottling, don't go for all the super ripe ones because they will soften in the cooking. And then if you're going to cook them again to serve, then it all gets a bit mushy. Just putting some acid or salt into the water as you peel them means they don't turn brown, they don't there's no oxidation going on, so you want to keep them in good condition. If you want to use different sugars, you can. I use the vanilla sugar most often, but you can use brown sugars to add, you know, they would, a soft brown sugar would go well with the plums, that kind of thing, you know, mix and match. I've also got cinnamon sugar at home that I've made in the same way as the vanilla, but I put it into the food blender, the sugar and the powdered cinnamon, and sort of whizzed it together for a few seconds just to combine it evenly. Very easy to make and very useful to have on the shelf. These are feeling quite well, so not too much breakage. I think it's nice to get back to having these kinds of things on the shelf instead of, you know, making everything into jams or chutneys. It's nice to have these to fall back on, because you don't always want to make, you know, a cooked pudding or something. You can use the apple on anything, you know, on cereals. You can use it in cooking, and all of the other things you can just eat straight out of the jar if you want to. You know, it's very convenient to have there. My mother used to do jars and jars and jars of blackcurrants. We have blackcurrant bushes, and I was always sent in as a small child underneath the bushes to pick all the fruit nobody else could reach. And then she used to jar them, bottle them, and then all through the winter, my father always wanted a blackcurrant pie, so we used to have that after for our Sunday dinner, and they were delicious. Loved them my whole life. Blackcurrants, I think they're fantastic flavour and very hard to get these days unless you grow them, which is a shame. Right. No questions so far, that's good. Right, let's get these into the jars. Get rid of all the peelings. I had a done inside, didn't it? Right, jars. These might go on their side. I don't really want to cut them up unless I can't get them in at all. Let's start giving them a bit of encouragement to go in. They're quite sort of forgiving. And like that. I'm just going to get some more water to pour it. Oh, I might have enough there. Get my sugar. 2 jars there. I'll just do the other 2 pairs in a moment. I'm also going to put in some amaretto, and this is amaretto that I make. And if you want to make it too, the recipe is on my recipe site. You can make some as well if you want to. It's very easy, very quick, very economic. So I'm going to pour some water over, but I'm not going to fill the jar up with water because the pears produce a lot of juice, and you end up with sort of too much. So I just put a bit in, about 1/3 of a jar, put the lid on, and make its own syrup with the water and the sugar. Then this one, definitely going to need some more water in there. I'll just do these other 2, and then I'll have hopefully end up with 2 more full jars before we go on to apples. If you've already prepped your fruit and you want to get it cooking, please do. Then you can see it before we finish. Make sure the water covers the tops of the jars, and then get it up to a boil, and then turn it down to simmer. And we're going to simmer it for 30 minutes as we've started from cold. If I do things from hot, I do it for 20, but we've done it from cold, everything. thing is about putting booze into these as well. You put it in and it stays in there. There's nothing hot to evaporate it as soon as it hits the jar. So put it in last, get the lid on, and that's where it will stay. So you do get a lovely flavour from it if you want to do that. I've actually made the drinks for Christmas video in the school free to view today. So from now till Christmas, well, it'll be free forevermore now, but which we did in our preserving classes about 2 years ago, and we made all sorts of things. So that's a very good source of different drinks. They're all easy to make and all fantastic, I think. Right, pears, take 2. I can get 2 jars out of these. Right, I don't know about, probably do 2 small jars for now. Okay. Oh, sugar first. Amaretto. You can use any spirit or Cointreau, that kind of thing, liqueur. Doesn't have to be amaretto, brandy, rum, whatever you like. And if you don't want any, just put the water in and leave it like that. Right. Oh. Oops. All right, I've got room for 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Got room for 3 jars of apples, so that's all I'll do. Because the canner will be full then. I'll do them to the jar. Now, apples you can leave in pieces like these ones. And those ones have had about 1/3 of that bottle jar water in them, but you can see how much there is when it's finished. It is right up to the top of the apples. The fruit will rise up in the jar. There's nothing you can do about that. I know it doesn't look fantastic, but it's all fine and safe. And you can see it in there moving around. So that's sort of apple chunks. And sometimes I do them just completely plain in plain water. Because sometimes I want to use them in a savoury thing. Because when if we do pork at all, I often do a dish of kind of roasted apples with them, with butter, and I don't really want them in a syrup. But so I do some like that. I do some sweet, or you can do them all plain and then decide when you open them how you're going to do them. Sometimes I make a sauce, apple sauce, and I usually put that in an ordinary lug jar, a smaller one, and use the whole jar when I open it, as a sauce doesn't have anything with it, nothing to sort of preserve it, but that's fine. Because what we're actually doing with all of this is sort of vacuum packing it. So providing everything's in a good state when you put it in, it should stay like that until you open it. Now this year I needed some blackberries for the ordinary preserving class in the week, the workshop. And I picked the blackberries at the weekend because they were ripe and the birds were getting at them. And they were massive. And I thought, oh, these are going to spoil before Wednesday. What can I do with them? And I didn't want to freeze them. So I put them in a jar, I washed them and picked them over, and then just put them into the jar as they were, no liquid, no sugar, and I sealed them up and water bathed them. And they were absolutely perfect when I opened them. I kept one of the jars I'd done for another month or so, and it was still fine when I used it. Next year I'll get my act together and actually do them and see how long they keep like that, because they didn't have any liquid, no sugar, no nothing. So it was quite surprising. They came out, they looked as though I'd just picked them, absolutely fresh. So I'll have to report back on that, because I've never seen it sort of done in a book or video or anything. I'm just cutting out some bruised bits as I go here. And the blackberry and apple that I have here, this little jar, that was blackberries and apples raw packed with just some sugar, no liquid, and it's produced enough liquid in there that is perfect for doing a crumble with. So that's another mix that I shan't bother to put any extra water in future. The blackberries and the apples combined produced enough. Right, let's do this one. It's not quite so big. These apples from my farm box are huge. So there's all sorts of ways of kind of prepping apples according to how you want to use them. And I would start at that point and think, well, in a year, I need these for that purpose and some more for that, and then prep them and preserve them accordingly, so that you don't have to do a lot when you come to open them. You can take a jar right off the shelf and just use it, which, as we know, is the major part of this game, really, is to make your own convenience food. I did make a whole load of, one year we had a massive harvest of apples, and I made a whole load of apple strudel mix, with raisins and spices and all that sort of thing. I mean, I don't make apple strudel. I thought I could use it in something, and I haven't used it at all. I don't particularly like it. It's still on the shelf, but I'll have to find a use for it eventually. So I'll have to get inspired. It kind of wasn't enough support for crumble, if you know what I mean. You put it in the dish and it's just a sort of a puree, and then you put the crumble on top and it all sort of disappears into the same thing. So it's still there. If I'm just doing a couple of jars of something that I've got left over, I'll just use my jam pan and or my stock pot and do them in there. I don't sort of do a huge, great pile of jars every time. I tend to do them as I go, especially if you've got things growing, because they're not always enough ripe all at the same time to actually process huge, great batches. I'll put a few more in here. No, you can see by working quickly, they haven't turned brown. I haven't put them in the water. And I'll get the tops on. Bit of sugar. You can put some cinnamon in if you like it. I'm just going to leave them plain. That's what we like. I'll turn that over so it doesn't get too discoloured. And wipe the tops. Heating up very quickly. I suppose it was all cold, so. Oh, I didn't put any water in. I will put a bit. To help it on its way. Dissolve the sugar. All right, and then I've just got to add some more water to bring it up over the top. They don't actually floating around, which is because they're all fairly small jars. I'll see if I've got a plate I can put on the top to hold them down. Go and get one. Wait a minute. Right. We'll just hold them under. I won't need any more water in there. It's because they were actually floating. I have seen YouTube videos of ladies in Italy preparing jars and jars and jars of things to water bath, and they've got a big like metal, like a zinc bath outside with a big heater underneath. And as they finish the jars, they just throw them in and they're all bobbing about. And so, you know, it's what you're used to doing, I suppose. So I'm going to leave you for about 15 minutes while I clear the decks. And then hopefully the water will have come up, got the heat up, and then we can talk about the other things. Yes, Jane, once the water is boiling, we're going to cook it for about 20 minutes, half an hour. You need to get it up to the boil and then turn it down to a simmer. So I've got it on the highest setting at the moment. And what I might do is just put my canner lid over it, not on the canner, just over the top, to sort of keep the heat in a bit because it's quite a cold day. And then it will maybe heat up a bit more quickly. But I'm going to go for about 15 minutes, clear all this up, and then I can tell you about the other things I want to when I come back. So I'll see you shortly. So this workshop was entitled Making Pie Fillings. And for me, that's what I've done because I'm not a fan of sort of thicker pie fillings, if you know what I mean. I prefer them to be on the drier side and not too much juice. And but if you want to sort of replicate a pie filling with a thick sauce, then the thing to use is Clear Jel modified starch. Now, I don't know what the process is for modifying it. It isn't an additive to it. It is like for example, a heat treatment or something like that they do to it, that is pre-gelatinized, chemically modified food starch, although that does say chemically, but it doesn't have anything on the list of ingredients as being in the jar. So it is a process. It's refined from waxy maize, and that's it. It's like corn flour, but it hasn't got the gluten and all of that sort of thing in it, I don't think. But it's a tasteless powder that you mix with water first, and then you can add it in especially if you're pressure canning. If you wanted to do like a steak and kidney pie filling in a thick gravy, this is what you would use, and it thickens it without altering the flavor or adding any other flavor at all. I'm not very good at using this. I'm not very good at mixing things into a smooth paste, full stop. Regardless, it's not, you know, I always end up with lumps and things. So, but what you do is, I've got a couple of glasses here. You put, see, this is the thing. I don't know how much you have to put because it depends how much liquid you've got to thicken. But I'll put a couple of teaspoonfuls and we'll see how we go. And then you add cold water to it and stir it. Already got lumps. And then it makes, believe it or not, a clear gel. I'll try and get those lumps smoothed out. I mean, that's as good as it's going to get. And that is sort of approximately the thickness of gravy. And you would add that to the gravy to thicken the whole amount, like you do corn flour. And you have to experiment a bit with how thick you want it to be, how much liquid you've got. You can add this then to hot liquid and mix it in. And it isn't affected by cooking at all. And it's the only thing you should add if you're pressure canning. You cannot add starch-based thickeners like flour or corn flour. They separate during the processing, and you end up with a thick sort of gloop at the bottom of the jar and a lot of separated out liquid, which becomes extremely unpleasant under storage. So you must never use straightforward flours. If you want to thicken it as it goes into the jar, you need to use Clear Jel. Personally, I prefer to thicken things when I go to use them. So if I need something thickened, I will mix up some corn flour and water or milk and add it in at that stage. But it is available and it is very good. We sell tubs and tubs of it, and sometimes we've got one lady, I think, who makes lots of open fruit pies, and she mixes it up with the fruit juice and pours it over the top, and it just sets as a gel on the pies and that kind of thing. So a lot of bakers use it, and they're not pressure canning, they just use it in their ordinary cooking. And a lot of pressure canners use it to achieve the effect that they are looking for. So when I entitled it making fruit pie fillings, if you want what most people would think of as a fruit pie filling, that's the thing to add when you jar up the fruit. Then so I'll just run through these again. The blackberry and apple was jarred dry pack and ended up this is just water bathed with some sugar and all its own juice. The apricots, I tend to make a syrup, so they're not renowned for being super juicy. So I pack the jars and then I make a equal parts sugar and water syrup, hot syrup, and pour it over. And sometimes I'll add some amaretto, sometimes I just leave them plain. So these are just in syrup. Figs in brandy. Now, every recipe you see for figs in brandy, it says to poach the figs in the syrup for about 10 minutes or something like that. Well, it just destroys them, I find. It is just no point. So what I tend to do is make a base syrup. I usually use brown sugar for this, one of the soft brown sugars. Sugar and water, and just for the last couple of minutes I'll stand the whole figs in it, then put it all in the jar, whole figs, syrup, and then add some brandy and seal it up straight away, and then water bath it, and they keep whole in that case and poach as they're being treated. That apple was dry packed and it's cooked in its own juices. The pears had a little bit of water in there because they're not quite as juicy as the apple, but there's still plenty of juice produced in there. And then the clementines we've talked about. Now, pineapple. Pineapple is fabulous done like this. And I just cut the I usually buy several pineapples at once when they're on offer and prep them. I mean, obviously you get a lot of waste with pineapples, but prepare them, cut all the outside skin off, cut the tops and bottoms off, and then chop them off away from the center core. If you've got time, put that center core into a pan, or if you've got several pineapples, do them all and put the core into the pan with some water, and then you can use that to jar them in, to water bath them in, to make a nice pineapple flavored juice. If you haven't, just put a bit of water in there, about a third, half a jar, and do them straight in water. I find they don't need any sugar at all. They're quite sweet enough, and they taste fantastic. We often have a jar like that as after a meal. If we haven't had, generally speaking, we don't have too many puddings, but if we do want something, then the pineapple is lovely. And we usually have it with plain yogurt on the top. And then these boozy plums are halved plums in a syrup. I would have made a syrup to go over those. They've got cinnamon sticks in there and a star anise, I think, and they would have some brandy in there as well. And they're nice in these sort of jars to gift. You don't want to put a great big canning jar in a hamper because A, you won't see it back again, and B, these sort of look a bit nicer as a gift, you know, to use a nice jam jar and label it and everything. They're nice done in red wine as well. You can poach them very, very briefly in a red wine syrup and pour that over. Don't leave them in there very long, they're only 2 or 3 minutes, and then put them in and water bath them. But those are all those. I'll move that out of the way. I want to show you the piece of kit that I use when I'm doing a lot of fruits in one go. I wouldn't generally use my canner, but I didn't really. It was better to use the canner and for you to use your canners than to sort of introduce more methods, I think. As I said, if you've only got 2 or 3 jars to do it in a jam pan or a stock pot. But when I'm doing this, I use this piece of kit, which I know Trisha has as well, but hers has 2 handles. Mine doesn't, because I managed to knock it over and one of the handles is broken. And so that's missing. I think we've got another handle, but we haven't put it on yet. But basically, this is excellent if you're doing a lot, because you can, there's the broken pieces of handle. You can stack these up, the jars up in here. It has a rack that goes in the bottom. You stack up the jars up to the top and you put on the lid. And then on the front here, there's a tap, and there's also a timer and a temperature. So you can set the temperature, and I generally have it on about 90-95 degrees, I think, and set the timer for as long as you want. And then you can leave it, and it will cook everything, water bath everything, and turn itself off. You can then come along and take the jars out. And then to empty it, you can just have it on a table or something where you can get a bowl underneath, and you can use the tap to easily empty the water that you filled it up with. If you've got lots and lots of, say, apples, and you want to make fruit juice with them, you can juice the apples and then put the juice in here if you've got a lot of juice, and then sterilize it in the Tom press, and then bottle it through the tap. You can hold the bottles underneath and just fill them up and seal them, and that's that job done. You don't have to water bath them again because the juice will be hot, and you can hot seal it. And you can even use it as a tea urn if you want to, but I think that would kind of spoil it somewhat if it all smelled of coffee or something. I suppose if you just did the hot water and then mix the drinks, if you've got an event that you're working at and you wanted to have lots of hot water, you could heat it up in here and again access it from the tap at the front. So this is an excellent piece of kit, and if you're producing, I would say it's an essential piece of kit. If you're just doing it at home for your own use, I think manage for as long as you can. But I am investigating a different model which might come in slightly cheaper than this one, but I haven't even seen it yet, so I'm not going to make any promises. But essentially, the process isn't difficult, it's just how you achieve it for what you're doing. Trish is saying she loves the Tom press. She uses it for sterilizing jars. Yeah, that's a good tip. There's also an attachment basket to extract juice that has been fab making cordials this year. Yeah, in addition to water bathing. Yeah, I use it a lot when I'm making cordials, and I put all the bottles in, and I don't do all that at that scale anymore, which is why this doesn't have the handle put back on, because I'm not screaming to use it, you know, because I've got basketfuls of fruit everywhere. You know, now I'm teaching, it's not quite such a pressure to get that done. But I hope that will help you get to where you want to be with your fruit. I'm going to carry on watching a canner as usual, and I will you know, obviously process it for the correct time, and we'll film them coming out of the canner. If you want to come back later on or another day and have a look at that, you can. But thank you for joining in, and no, I'm not sure what we're doing next time, but we've got 2 to go, and I know venison is last, so next time what I think is a kind of casserole thing. Okay, I'll see you where are we now? In December, I guess. What date is it? 8th of December. So I'll see you then. Hello, welcome back. I'm just going to take the jars out of my pan. They've had their 30 minutes. So I'm just going to lift them out now, if I can get hold of them, because they're all floating and float away from me as soon as I try to get hold of it. Oh. Add some pears. These are apples. Right, what I'm going to do is do the bands up on these so they're firm, and leave them to cool overnight. Just tighten them up. Careful, you need a cloth because they're very hot. That's that. So we've got the 3 apples there and 3 pears. And these are all the plums in the bottom, I think. Oh, can't get hold of them. Oh. As soon as you get one out, you can get the rest. So those are the red plums. And some more pears. Yeah, that's not a bad haul for one batch. 12 jars of fruit, all ready to go whenever we need them. I hope you have fun doing it, and get a good mixture of fruits, and continue during the year. You know, do them when they're seasonal and get them on the shelf, and then you've always got variety. So I'll see you soon.